The funeral ended quietly, just like her life. Everyone said she died with nothing. As he packed her few belongings, the husband found a loose floorboard. Beneath it sat an old leather briefcase, wrapped in cloth. He almost ignored it. Inside were documents, dates, names. Then he saw the bank statements. His hands started shaking. His poor wife had been hiding a fortune, and the truth hurt more than the money. Before we begin, subscribe to our channel and comment where you are watching from so we can bring more stories like these. Michael Turner woke up the same way he had for the past 15 years. Before the sun, before the noise, before the world remembered him. The alarm didn't even get a chance to ring. His eyes opened naturally, trained by routine and responsibility, and for a split second, he forgot. Then the quiet hit him. Not the peaceful quiet he and Grace used to share. Not the soft morning quiet with the kettle warming and the radio murmuring low gospel in the background. This quiet was hollow, empty, the kind that reminded you someone was missing even before your brain could catch up. Michael sat up slowly, feet touching the cold hardwood floor. Grace's side of the bed was still neatly made, just like he'd left it after the funeral. He hadn't slept on her side, couldn't bring himself to mess it up. It felt wrong, like erasing proof that she'd been there. He rubbed his face with both hands and exhaled. Another day, he muttered, to nobody. The house was small, always had been. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a kitchen just big enough for 2 people to bump hips while cooking. Grace used to laugh when that happened. A soft laugh, not loud, never attention-seeking. Michael shuffled into the kitchen and put the kettle on, out of habit more than thirst. Grace used to tease him about it. "You don't even drink tea every morning," she'd say. "Don't matter," he'd reply. "Feels right." That was Grace. Everything with her felt right, even when it didn't make sense. They met 15 years ago at a bus stop on the south side of town. She'd been sitting on the bench, reading a paperback with a torn cover, dressed in a thrift store coat that looked 2 sizes too big. No makeup, no jewelry, hair pulled back like she didn't care who noticed her. He offered her half his umbrella when it started raining. She smiled like it surprised her. That smile had wrecked his whole life in the best way. Grace never talked about her past. Not much anyway. Just said she moved around a lot, worked odd jobs, kept to herself. No family, no money. "Just me," she'd say with a shrug, "and that's enough." Michael believed her, trusted her, loved her for it. He'd grown up watching money tear people apart. Brothers fighting, cousins scheming, friends changing once they got a little taste of more. Grace was different. She didn't want things, didn't dream out loud about houses or trips or cars. She dreamed small. A quiet home, shared meals, mornings without rushing, nights without yelling. And Michael gave her that. He worked maintenance at the community college for years. Not glamorous, not rich, but steady, honest. When they married, she insisted on a courthouse ceremony. No rings at first, no photos on social media, no announcements. "Let it just be ours," she'd said. They lived modestly, shopped at thrift stores together, fixed things instead of replacing them, ate at the same diner every Saturday morning like clockwork. Grace always paid cash, always exact. "No debt," she'd say. "Debt is loud." Michael smiled at the memory as the kettle whistled. He poured 1 mug, just 1. That still hurt. He sat at the small kitchen table and wrapped his hands around the ceramic, staring at the faint crack in the wall near the window. Grace used to say she liked that crack, said it gave the house character. Perfect things are boring, she'd tell him. The funeral had been small, just like she wanted. No long guest list, no speeches, no fuss. A few neighbors, Mrs. Helen Wright from next door, the pastor, Michael. That was it. No mysterious relatives, no dramatic revelations. At least, that's what Michael thought. At least, that's what Michael thought. He stood and started cleaning, not because the house was dirty, but because stillness made his chest tighten. Grace used to clean when she was thinking too hard, too. Movement helps, she'd say, keeps the mind from spiraling. He opened cabinets, wiped counters, straightened things already straight. Then he came to the living room. Grace's chair sat by the window, same as always. A small blanket folded over the arm. The book she'd been reading lay face down on the side table, bookmarks still in place like she planned to come back to it. Michael picked it up carefully. "You were always mid-chapter," he whispered. He noticed something odd then, something he'd never paid attention to before. A drawer beneath the side table, locked. Michael frowned. Grace didn't lock things, ever. He crouched and tugged gently. It didn't budge. "Ha," he murmured, stood up slowly, a strange unease crawling up his spine. He looked around the room like the house might explain itself. Grace had always been private, not secretive, just contained, like a lake that looked calm, but might be deeper than you thought. He shook his head. "Don't start," he told himself. "You're tired." But the feeling didn't leave. 15 years. 15 years of knowing every habit, every grocery preference, every quiet sigh she made when she thought he wasn't listening. And yet, there were things he never asked, because he didn't want to pry, because he loved her simplicity, because he believed the story she told him, that she had nothing but love to give. Michael walked down the hallway toward the bedroom, passing framed photos of their life together. No vacations, no flashy milestones, just birthdays, anniversaries, random afternoons, smiling at the camera because one of them said, "Let's remember this." He paused at one photo, Grace on the porch, sunlight catching her face just right. "You happy?" he'd asked when he took it. She looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Yes," she said, "because you don't ask me to be anything else." At the time, he thought it was sweet. Now, it felt loaded. Michael sat on the edge of the bed and rubbed his temples. He missed her. God, he missed her. But somewhere beneath the grief, beneath the love, beneath the memories, something else was stirring. A question. A quiet one, but dangerous one. Who was Grace before she chose him? And why did it suddenly feel like she'd taken a part of the truth with her? He stood up and looked around the room again. Really looked. The house felt the same, but Michael didn't. And he had no idea that beneath his feet, beneath the floorboards and the memories, the answers were already waiting. The days after the funeral didn't feel real. They felt like Michael Turner was walking through somebody else's life. His body doing what it was supposed to do. His mouth saying thank you when folks dropped off casseroles. His hands shaking other hands, while his mind stayed stuck on one single image. Grace's face, peaceful and still, like she'd finally let go of something she'd carried too long. By the third day, the visitors slowed down. The calls stopped. The house settled back into its normal quiet. And that's when the little things started talking. Michael tried to keep busy. That was his style. When pain showed up, he didn't sit down and hold its hand. He picked up a mop. He scrubbed a sink. He fixed a hinge. He did something useful. Because if his hands were moving, his heart didn't have as much room to break. So he started cleaning. Not the lazy wipe the counter and call it a day kind of cleaning either. The deep, grief-fueled kind. The kind where you open drawers you never open, move furniture you've ignored for years, and find dust in places you didn't know existed. He started in the kitchen. Grace's kitchen. She was the kind of woman who didn't cook fancy, but everything she made tasted like comfort. Soup that fixed bad days, cornbread that made the whole house smell like safety, coffee that always hit just right, even when it was cheap. Michael opened the cabinet where she kept her cookbooks, old ones, mostly secondhand, with notes scribbled in the margins. He ran his fingers along the spines, smiling softly. "Still can't believe you got all these recipes and never once measured anything," he muttered. "Just vibes and faith." He pulled one cookbook out, and it felt heavier than it should have. Michael frowned. He shook it gently. Something shifted inside. His smile faded. He opened it, flipping through the pages, expecting maybe an old note, a pressed flower, one of those little sentimental things Grace liked to tuck away and forget about. Instead, an envelope slid out and hit the counter with a soft thunk. Michael stared at it. It wasn't a greeting card envelope. It wasn't church mail. It looked official. Thick paper, printed logo, clean edges. The kind of envelope that came with rules. He picked it up. The return address wasn't local. It was foreign. A bank logo he didn't recognize. Letters that looked slightly different than what he was used to. Not fully another language, but enough to make his eyebrows lift. Michael swallowed. "Okay," he whispered. "What is this?" He opened it carefully. Inside was another folded paper. Numbers. Columns. Something that looked like an account statement. He didn't understand all of it, but he understood enough to feel his pulse jump. Balance. Transactions. Amounts that didn't match the life Grace lived. Michael's throat tightened. He set the paper down like it was hot. "Maybe it's old," he told himself quickly. "Maybe it's junk mail. Maybe she—" He stopped. Grace didn't get junk mail from foreign banks. Grace didn't even have a credit card. Or at least, that's what he believed. Michael leaned back against the counter, breathing slowly through his nose. He stared at the cookbook, at the envelope, at the neat handwriting on the statement. Then his eyes drifted to the counter, where Grace used to stand and chop onions, humming quietly, acting like the world had never hurt her. He shook his head. "Nah," he muttered. "I'm trippin'." He slid the envelope back into the cookbook, like he was putting a snake back into a cage, and closed it. But the peace didn't come back. It just shifted. He moved to the living room next. Grace's thrift store coat still hung on the hook by the door. The one she wore, even when Michael offered to buy her something new. "I don't need new," she'd always say. "I need safe." He used to think it was just her being modest. Now that word, safe, hit different. Michael started sorting through a stack of mail on the side table. Mostly normal stuff. Utility flyers, coupons, a church donation receipt. Then he found another envelope, and another. Both tucked inside magazines, like somebody didn't want them seen at first glance. Same vibe. Same official feel. Same kind of logo. His mouth went dry. He spread them out on the table like evidence. One had a stamp. Another had a watermark. And one had an account number printed along the bottom that looked way too long to to belong to any regular checking account. Michael's chest tightened with that slow, creeping dread. It wasn't panic yet. It was that feeling you get when you're walking and the sidewalk suddenly dips, like your world just lowered half an inch and your body is trying to adjust. He kept digging anyway, because once you see a crack, He went down the hallway and opened the linen closet, searching for cleaning wipes and trash bags. On the top shelf, behind folded towels, he found a small box he didn't recognize. It wasn't labeled. Grace usually labeled everything. Tiny handwriting, neat and careful. Michael pulled it down and opened it. Receipts. Not shopping receipts. Bank receipts. Wire transfers. Foreign bank logos again. His fingers trembled slightly as he flipped through them. One receipt had a date from just 6 months ago. Grace had been doing this recently. Whatever this was, Michael sat on the floor of the hallway, back against the wall, staring at the receipts like they might start talking. "Why?" he whispered. His eyes burned. His mind jumped to stupid conclusions first, because grief makes your brain messy. Was she hiding money? Was she planning to leave? Was she living some double life right under his nose? Then he remembered Grace's face when she looked at him. The way she held his hand like she meant it. The way she cried quietly at sad commercials. The way she volunteered at the church without telling anybody. That wasn't a woman plotting. That was a woman surviving. Michael stood up too fast, dizzy. He walked into the bedroom and opened Grace's dresser. Her clothes were exactly what he expected. Simple, thrift store blouses, faded jeans, the same 2 pairs of comfortable shoes. Nothing flashy, no jewelry, no secret luxury stash, no designer anything. Which somehow made it worse, because it meant she had money somewhere, and still refused to live like it. He turned toward the framed photo on the dresser, him and Grace smiling at the diner booth, her hand resting on his. His eyes fell on the back of the frame. Something was taped there. Michael's brows lifted. He slowly turned the frame around. A key, taped behind it, like it was hiding in plain sight. His breath caught. It wasn't a house key. It was smaller, shinier, clean. The kind of key that opened something important. A lockbox, a safe deposit box. Something like that. Michael peeled the tape carefully and held the key in his palm, staring at it like it might bite him. "That ain't," he started, then stopped, because he realized something. Grace had always been careful about what she let people see, even him. A knock came at the front door, then, sharp enough to make him jump. Michael wiped his face and walked to the living room, still holding the key. When he opened the door, Mrs. Helen Wright stood there with a casserole dish and that concerned auntie look that never turned off. "Baby," she said softly, "I just wanted to check on you." Michael forced a small smile. "I'm all right, Mrs. Wright." She stepped inside, eyes scanning the living room like she was checking for damage. "I know you hurtin'," she said, setting the dish down. Grace was a good woman. Michael nodded, throat tight. "Yeah." Mrs. Wright hesitated, like she was debating whether to say something. Then she said it anyway. "You know, Grace always paid cash," she mentioned casually. "Never worried." Michael froze. His smile didn't move, but his eyes sharpened. "Paid cash?" he echoed. Mrs. Wright nodded. "Mm-hmm. Every time. Groceries, repairs, little donations. Cash, like she didn't want to leave a trail." Michael's stomach dropped. Mrs. Wright didn't notice his expression changing. She just kept going. "I used to tell her, 'Girl, at least get you a card, what if you lose it?' And she'd just smile and say, 'I'll be fine,' like she knew something I didn't." Michael forced a laugh that came out wrong. Grace was particular. Mrs. Wright smiled gently. That she was. She touched his shoulder, then left, telling him to eat, to rest, to call if he needed anything. Michael closed the door. The house felt smaller, tighter, like the walls had leaned in while he wasn't looking. He stood in the living room, staring at the key in his hand. Then he looked down at the floor, a loose floorboard near the hallway entrance. He'd stepped over it 1,000 times. Grace had stepped over it too. He walked toward it, heart thumping harder now. He knelt, pressed his fingers against the edge. It lifted easier than it should have, like it had been opened before, recently. A cold breath slid up his spine. He slid the board aside, and there it was. A briefcase, black leather, old but well kept. The kind of briefcase that didn't belong in a house like this. The kind of briefcase Grace never once mentioned. Michael stared at it for a long time. His hands hovered over it. His mind screamed, "Don't," but his heart whispered, "You have to." He grabbed the handle. It was heavier than he expected, not just in weight. In meaning, Michael carried it to the kitchen like he was carrying a truth he wasn't ready to hold. He set it on the table, and for a long moment, he just stood there, breathing, staring at the locked clasps. His fingers trembled as they moved toward the latch, because whatever was inside that briefcase, it was about to change everything he thought he knew about Grace Turner, and maybe about himself too. Michael sat at the kitchen table for a long time without moving. The briefcase rested in front of him, black leather catching the overhead light like it was daring him to open it. The kettle from earlier had gone cold. The casserole Mrs. Wright brought sat untouched on the counter. The house felt like it was holding its breath. Michael's hands were steady when he reached for the key. That surprised him. He'd expected shaking, panic, something dramatic. But what he felt instead was a deep, quiet dread. The kind that creeps in when your heart already knows the truth, even if your mind hasn't caught up yet. The key slid into the lock smoothly, too smoothly, like it had been used recently. Click. The sound echoed louder than it should have in the small kitchen. Michael swallowed hard and flipped the clasps open. The briefcase opened slowly, as if even it knew what it carried. Inside wasn't jewelry, wasn't cash, wasn't anything loud or flashy. It was worse. Neat stacks of documents filled the case, organized, labeled, deliberate. Bank statements, property deeds, stock certificates, folders marked with dates, and right on top, a passport. Not Grace's name, not the woman he married, a different name entirely. Michael stared at it, his brain refusing to cooperate at first. "That ain't," he whispered. He picked it up. Same face, same eyes, same woman who used to fall asleep on his shoulder watching reruns, but a different name, different birth date, different country. His chest tightened like a fist closing around his lungs. He dropped the passport back into the case and dug deeper, faster now, like he needed confirmation. Like maybe if he found something normal, it would all make sense again. He didn't. The bank statements listed balances that made his stomach flip. Hundreds of thousands, then millions, accounts in places he'd never been. Transfers dated years apart, careful and quiet. Property deeds followed, commercial buildings, land parcels, places far away from their modest little town. Grace owned things, a lot of things. Michael pushed his chair back hard enough that it scraped against the floor. "No," he said out loud. "No, no, no." He paced the kitchen, rubbing his hands together, then dragged them down his face. She told him she was poor. She insisted on splitting bills even when he told her not to. She turned down vacations, turned down gifts, turned down upgrades. She told him money ruined people. And all this time, Michael slammed his palm on the table. "Who were you?" he demanded the empty room. His voice cracked on the last word. He picked up one of the folders and flipped it open. More documents, more accounts, a timeline of transactions stretching back decades. Grace hadn't stumbled into money. She'd been managing it, controlling it, hiding it. His knees buckled slightly, and he sat back down, breath coming shallow. His mind spiraled now, angry, confused, hurt. Did she lie to me our whole marriage? Was I some kind of experiment? Was she laughing at me behind my back? He grabbed a letter from the bottom of the case, handwritten, Grace's handwriting. His hands shook as he unfolded it. He didn't read it yet. Couldn't. He wasn't ready for her voice. Instead, he kept digging. A fake ID. Different hair color. Grace had been living under a constructed identity. The realization hit him like a body blow. Michael stood up again, pacing harder now. "You don't get to do this," he said through clenched teeth. "You don't get to leave me and then drop this on me." His anger burned hot and sharp, cutting through the grief for the first time since she died. He grabbed the letter again, then hesitated. A knock came at the door. Michael froze. The knock came again. Firm, polite. His heart hammered. For a wild second, his mind went somewhere irrational. They found her. Whoever she was hiding from finally showed up. He closed the briefcase quickly, not locking it, just shutting it, and walked to the door with stiff steps. When he opened it, a man stood on the porch. Early 50s, calm, well-dressed, but not flashy. Suit pressed clean, posture relaxed. He looked like someone who lived in offices and spoke carefully. "Mr. Michael Turner?" the man asked gently. Michael nodded, suspicious. "Yeah." The man offered a respectful half-smile. "My name is Daniel Foster. I'm sorry for your loss." Michael didn't return the smile. "Do I know you?" Daniel shook his head. "No, but I knew your wife. Or, I knew of her." Michael's pulse spiked. "What do you want?" he asked flatly. Daniel glanced down briefly, then met his eyes again. "May I come in? This conversation shouldn't happen on the porch." Michael hesitated, then stepped aside. Daniel entered the house slowly, eyes flicking briefly around like he was memorizing exits, then settling back into calm neutrality. "You're a lawyer," Michael said. "Not a question." Daniel nodded. "Trust and estate law, among other things." Michael crossed his arms. "Start talking." Daniel took a breath. "Your wife left instructions, very specific ones. I was to come only after her passing, and only if you were still living here." Michael laughed once, sharp and humorless. "So this was planned?" Daniel didn't flinch. Michael's hands curled into fists. "Plan to lie to me?" Daniel's expression softened slightly. "Plan to protect you." Michael scoffed. "By hiding millions." Daniel paused, then said carefully, "By hiding danger." The word landed heavy. Michael swallowed. "Explain." Daniel glanced toward the kitchen table. "You found the briefcase." It wasn't a question. Michael nodded slowly. Daniel continued. "Grace inherited a large settlement decades ago. Corporate corruption case. Massive. The company tried to bury it. People connected to it didn't all survive." Michael's blood ran cold. "She testified," Daniel said quietly. "She was young, alone, and very brave. After the settlement, she became a liability. Michael felt dizzy. She disappeared, Daniel went on. Changed her name, cut all ties. She lived small on purpose. Not because she didn't value money, but because money made her visible. Michael sank into the chair again, his anger draining into something heavier. She loved you, Daniel said firmly. That wasn't a lie. You were the safest choice she ever made. Not because you were weak, but because you were good. Michael stared at the floor. So what? He whispered. My whole marriage was a secret mission? Daniel shook his head. No, it was a refuge. Michael laughed bitterly. Funny way of showing trust. Daniel nodded. She struggled with that. She wrote about it. Michael's head snapped up. Wrote? Daniel nodded toward the briefcase. The letters. They're for you. Silence filled the kitchen again. Michael looked at the closed briefcase like it might explode. All this time, he said quietly, I thought I married a poor woman. Daniel met his eyes. You married a careful one. Michael leaned back, exhaustion washing over him. She should have told me, he whispered. Daniel didn't argue. He simply said, she was afraid telling you would put you in danger. Michael closed his eyes. Because the worst part wasn't the money. It was realizing the woman he loved carried a fear he never knew about, and carried it alone. Michael didn't speak for a long minute. He just sat there at the kitchen table, staring at the closed briefcase like it was some kind of animal that might lunge if he looked away. His chest felt tight, but not in the crying way. In the can't breathe because your whole life just shifted sideways way. Daniel Foster stood across from him, with both hands relaxed at his sides, calm like he delivered bad news for a living, which he probably did. Michael finally cleared his throat. So, what are you saying? My wife was on the run? Daniel nodded slowly. Not in the dramatic movie way, not anymore. But yes, for a long time, she lived like someone who knew the wrong people were capable of the worst things. Michael's jaw clenched. From who? Daniel hesitated, choosing his words like they cost money. A corporate network, executives, fixers, private security contractors. Back then, they were tied to a company called Harrogate Systems. Michael blinked. Never heard of it. You wouldn't have, Daniel said. They changed names after the settlement, merged, rebranded, buried the story under new logos and fresh press releases. Michael pushed his tongue against his teeth, thinking, and Grace was part of that? Daniel shook his head fast. Grace was the one who exposed it. Michael felt something cold slide through his stomach. Daniel continued gently. There was a settlement, massive, the kind that makes headlines, but it didn't stay public for long. People started dying. Not all at once, not obviously connected, but enough that Grace understood one thing clearly. Daniel paused. She was safer invisible. Michael's eyes burned. So she married me for cover? Daniel's expression tightened. She married you because you loved her when you had no reason to want anything from her. Michael scoffed, not because he disagreed, but because it hurt. Daniel stepped closer to the table, voice still low. She watched people change when they smelled money. She watched people smile while planning harm. She didn't want that around you. Michael's throat tightened at the word you. So I was, what? Michael asked. Some safe little bubble? Daniel nodded once. You were peace. The way Daniel said it, like it was a fact, like it was obvious, made Michael's anger wobble. Because Grace did treat their life like something fragile and sacred. She fought hard to keep it simple. No photos online. No big celebrations. No flashy purchases. No vacations where strangers might recognize her. And Michael had always thought she was just humble. Now it sounded like survival. Michael rubbed his forehead. "Okay," he said, voice hoarse. "Okay, so why come now? Why show up at my door?" Daniel looked toward the briefcase. "Because she left instructions, and because there's a trust." Michael let out a short, bitter laugh. "Of course there is." Daniel didn't react. She established it under her former name. It was managed quietly, through layers of legal protection. After her death, the trust activates, and I become responsible for transferring control to you. Michael's head snapped up. "To me?" Daniel nodded. "To you." Michael stared at him like he'd misheard. "Why me? If she had all that money, why not, I don't know, charity, church, somebody else?" Daniel's eyes softened. "Because you were her husband, her family, the one person she trusted enough to build a life with." Michael's voice rose, sharp with pain. "Trusted me enough to marry me, but not enough to tell me who she was?" Silence. Daniel didn't dodge it. He just let it sit there. Then he said quietly, "She trusted your heart, not your ability to survive the danger." Michael opened his mouth, then closed it again. That hit different. Daniel reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope. "This is for you," he said, placing it on the table carefully. Her instructions, and her explanation in her own words. Michael stared at the envelope. Grace's handwriting was on it. Michael. Just that. Like she was calling him softly from the other side. His fingers hovered over it, but he didn't open it yet. He wasn't ready to hear her voice in paper form. Not when his emotions were already a mess. Daniel looked around the kitchen, eyes landing briefly on the faded dish towel hanging from the oven handle, then on the worn table that had hosted 15 years of meals. "You gave her what she couldn't buy," Daniel said. Michael swallowed. "And she gave me, what, a lie?" Daniel shook his head. "She gave you a life, the one she always wanted. ... The one she didn't think she'd ever be allowed to have." Michael's hands trembled now. He clenched them together. "So what happens now?" he asked. Daniel's face turned more serious. "Now you learn everything, and you decide what to do with it." Michael looked up. "Decide?" Daniel nodded. "Grace built protections into the trust, but there are choices that can't be made by anyone except you." Michael breathed out slowly. "And the danger?" Daniel hesitated again. "Most of the people from back then are gone or powerless, but money has a way of attracting attention, and old enemies have a way of waking up when they smell legacy being transferred." Michael's skin prickled. Daniel continued, "Grace lived small, so nobody noticed her. Her death is public now. If the wrong people connect her old name to her new one, it could stir things up." Michael's mouth went dry. "So you're telling me even dead, she's still hiding?" Daniel nodded gently. "She's trying to keep you safe." Michael leaned back, staring at the ceiling for a second like he was asking God why his grief had to come with a side of danger. Then he looked at Daniel again, voice rough. "Did she ever talk about me? Like when she was planning all this?" Daniel's expression softened. "Yes." Michael held his breath. Daniel said, "She said you were the first man who ever made her feel like she could breathe." Michael's eyes stung. "She said she didn't deserve you," Daniel added, "but she chose you anyway, because for once in her life, she wanted something real." Michael looked down at the envelope again. His hands shook as he pulled it closer. The grief was still there, the anger too. But now, underneath it all, there was something else growing. A realization. Grace didn't live poor because she was broke. She lived poor because she was protecting a life she loved too much to risk. And whatever was in that envelope, whatever she wrote, it was about to break him open. Michael stared at the envelope like it was the last step on a staircase he wasn't sure he wanted to climb. Daniel Foster stayed quiet, giving him space, but not leaving. Like he knew Michael might fall apart the second he broke that seal. The kitchen light buzzed faintly overhead. The old wall clock ticked like it had no idea the world just changed. Michael slid his thumb under the flap. His hands were shaking now. Not the dramatic shaking of fear, more like his body was finally catching up to what his heart had been holding in for days. He opened it. Inside were letters. Not one, several, neatly stacked, each one dated. Grace's handwriting on every envelope, soft, careful strokes, like she was trying not to make noise, even on paper. Michael picked up the first one. His throat tightened before he even read a word. Daniel spoke gently from across the table. "You don't have to read them all tonight." Michael didn't look up. "Yeah," he whispered. "I do." He unfolded the first letter slowly, like he might tear her voice in half if he moved too fast. And there she was, not in the room, not in the bed, not in the hallway, but in the words. "Michael, if you're reading this, I'm gone." Michael's breath hitched. He pressed his lips together hard, holding in a sound that wanted to escape. Grace's letter continued. "I hate that this is how you find out. I hate that I didn't have the courage to tell you to your face. But if you're reading this, it means I ran out of time, and I couldn't leave you with nothing but questions." Michael's eyes blurred. He wiped them angrily with the back of his hand, like tears had no right to show up while he was this mad. "I didn't lie to you to control you. I didn't hide the truth because I didn't love you. I hid the truth to protect us both." Michael's jaw clenched so hard it ached. Protect. That word again. He kept reading. "Before you met me, I lived a life that wasn't mine. I wore names like coats. I learned how to disappear. I learned how to smile when my stomach was in knots. I learned how to walk into a room and act normal while knowing someone might be watching." Michael swallowed, the room spinning just a little. Grace always hated crowds. She always positioned herself where she could see exits. She always flinched, just slightly, when a car door slammed too hard outside. He thought she was just anxious. She was alert. There was money involved, she wrote. A lot of it. The kind that makes people dangerous. The kind that makes you a target just for breathing. Michael's hands tightened around the paper. So all those times she said money ruins people, she wasn't speaking like a philosopher. She was speaking like a survivor. "I met you when I was tired," Grace wrote. "Tired of running. Tired of being alone. Tired of looking over my shoulder. And you were simple in the best way. Honest, steady. You offered me half your umbrella like it was nothing. Like kindness was normal for you." Michael's chest burned. He remembered that day. The rain. The way she smiled like she hadn't been offered anything gentle in a long time. Grace continued. "I told myself I would tell you everything one day. I told myself once we were safe, once enough time passed, once I knew the danger was gone, I would sit you down and tell you who I really was. But every year I looked at you and thought, why risk it?" Michael's eyes narrowed, hurt rising again. Why risk it? So he was a risk now? "Because the truth isn't just a story," Grace wrote. "It comes with consequences, and if you knew, you'd carry it too. You'd look at strangers differently. You'd tense up at night. You'd lose the peace you deserve." Michael's throat tightened. Peace. That was what Daniel said. Grace wanted him to keep it. But it still felt like she took something from him. The right to know. He flipped to the second letter, breathing harder now. This one was dated 5 years earlier. Michael, if you ever find the briefcase by accident, I need you to promise me something. Don't hate me before you read everything. Michael let out a harsh laugh that sounded like a sob halfway through. Too late, he whispered. He read on. I know how this looks. I know it feels like betrayal. But listen to me, baby. The money was never the point. I didn't live simple because I was pretending to be someone good. I lived simple because I didn't want the world to find me again. Michael's hands shook. It hit him in layers. The thrift store clothes weren't humility. They were camouflage. No jewelry wasn't modesty. It was avoidance. No social media wasn't privacy. It was survival. He turned to Daniel, voice cracking. All those times, she wouldn't let me post a picture. She'd say, I don't like attention. Daniel nodded. She meant it. Michael looked down again. There was another paragraph, the handwriting slightly messier, like Grace's emotions slipped through the pen. And Michael, I chose you. Not because you were convenient. Not because you were cover. Because you loved me when you thought I had nothing. Michael froze. That line. It felt like it echoed against his ribs. Because that was exactly what made him love her so deeply. She wasn't chasing wealth. She wasn't flashy. She was pure. Now he realized she was testing love through simplicity. Not as a game, but as protection. He kept reading. People don't treat you the same when they know you have money. They look at you like a prize, like a solution, like a bank. I didn't want that between us. Michael's eyes stung again. He remembered how proud she looked the day she insisted on paying her half of the electric bill. He'd teased her. Girl, let me handle it. She'd smiled sweetly and said, no, we're partners. 0. He thought it was principles. It was her, making sure their love never turned into an arrangement. Michael's breathing got shaky. He reached into the envelope again and found the last letter, sealed separately. This one was different. The paper was thicker. The handwriting on the front looked like Grace wrote it on a hard day. Read this one last. Michael hesitated. Then he opened it anyway, because Michael Turner wasn't built to sit with mystery. Not anymore. The letter inside was longer, written like Grace was talking to him face to face. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're probably angry. You have every right to be. Michael's lips parted slightly. She knew him, even in death. But please understand something. I didn't keep this from you because I didn't trust you. I kept it from you because I trusted you too much. Michael's whole body went still. Daniel watched him carefully from across the table, like he could see the moment those words pierced through. I trusted that if you knew, you would try to protect me. You would confront people. You would ask questions. You would stand up like you always do. And that would have gotten you hurt. Michael's throat tightened so much it felt like he was swallowing glass. Grace's handwriting grew slightly uneven in the next lines. I could handle fear. I could handle being hunted. But I could not handle being the reason you got killed. Michael's eyes snapped shut. That word, killed, felt like somebody slammed a door inside his chest. He pressed his fingertips to his forehead, breathing through the pain. I didn't know, he whispered, voice broken. Grace's letter didn't stop. Michael, you loved me in the only way that ever made me feel safe. You loved me without questions, without greed, without needing anything from me. That is rare. That is sacred. Michael's shoulders shook. He couldn't hold it anymore. Tears slid down his face in hot, helpless streams. Daniel spoke softly. Take your... Michael shook his head, still reading through blurred vision. If you're holding that briefcase, then you know now. I wasn't hiding money from you. I was hiding danger for you. Michael's lips trembled. He looked up at Daniel, eyes red. So why? Why didn't she ever trust me enough to tell me? Just once, in all those years. Daniel's expression turned sad. Because she was afraid the truth would steal the exact thing she loved most, he said quietly. Your peace. Michael stared at the letters again, grief twisting into a new shape inside him. He wasn't betrayed. He was protected. But protection came with a cost. 15 years of marriage built on love and a wall. Michael wiped his face slowly. One question still burned. Not about the money, not even about the danger. It was the one that made his heart ache the most. If Grace loved him that deeply, how heavy must her fear have been to carry it alone? The house felt different after Daniel left. Not quieter. Quieter had been there since Grace died, but heavier. Like the walls were listening now. Like every room held its breath, waiting to see what Michael Turner would do next. Michael sat alone at the kitchen table, long after the door closed behind Daniel. The briefcase was still open, papers spread like a confession that couldn't be taken back. Grace's letters lay stacked neatly beside his mug, their corners curling slightly where his fingers had clutched them too hard. He wasn't crying anymore. That scared him more than the tears, because when the tears stopped, the decision came. Daniel's words echoed in his head. You have a choice. Michael rubbed his hands together slowly, staring at the table like it might give him answers. A choice. Grace had left him a fortune wrapped in fear, sacrifice, and love. A fortune built from pain that wasn't his, but now belonged to him anyway. He stood up abruptly and grabbed his jacket. The house felt too tight, too full of her voice, too full of what-ifs. He needed air. The park was only 3 blocks away. Michael and Grace used to walk there on Sundays after church, stopping at the same bench every time. The one under the crooked oak tree that leaned like it had seen too much but refused to fall. Michael sat down hard, elbows on his knees, staring at the cracked sidewalk. Kids laughed in the distance. A couple walked by, holding hands. Life didn't stop just because his had cracked open. He pulled Grace's last letter out of his jacket pocket and unfolded it again. Money changes people. Love shouldn't. He whispered the line out loud, like maybe hearing it would make it hurt less. You knew, he said to the empty bench beside him. You knew this would tear me up. He pictured Grace sitting there, hands folded, listening quietly, like she always did when he was thinking out loud. You could have trusted me, he said, voice breaking. I could have handled it. I would have handled it. But even as he said it, something inside him hesitated. Would he have? Michael knew himself. He was protective to a fault, loyal, stubborn. If Grace had told him the truth, would he have left it alone? Or would he have gone digging, asking questions, looking into names, trying to fix something that wasn't broken yet? Trying to be a hero? Michael exhaled sharply. She knew him better than he wanted to admit. He walked next to the diner after that, the same one they'd gone to every Saturday morning. Same booth, same waitress, same order. He stood outside, staring through the window. Grace always insisted on paying cash. Why don't you let me treat you sometimes? He used to joke. She'd smile and say, you already do. He used to think she meant emotionally. Now he realized she meant literally, because if she let him pay everything, the balance would shift. Money had way. Grace never wanted it between them. Michael turned away before he went inside. He wasn't ready for memories to talk back yet. The thrift store came next, Grace's favorite place. She loved digging through racks, like she was hunting for stories instead of clothes. Michael walked in and immediately smelled that familiar mix of dust, fabric softener, and old perfume. He drifted toward the women's section without thinking. He touched a cardigan almost identical to one Grace used to wear. His fingers trembled. "She chose this," he whispered. "She chose this life." That's when it finally hit him. Grace didn't hide her wealth because she didn't trust Michael. She hid it because she trusted who he was without it. She trusted that he loved her when she looked poor. She trusted that he wouldn't need money to stay. And she was right. Michael sank onto a small bench near the fitting rooms, and shaking again, but this time, not from anger, from understanding. By the time he reached the cemetery, the sun was low. Golden light spilled across the rows of headstones, making everything look softer than it really was. Grace's grave was simple, just her name. No titles, no dates beyond what mattered. Michael knelt slowly, joints protesting, and rested his hand against the cool stone. "I'm mad at you," he admitted quietly. "I probably always will be." The wind moved gently through the trees, rustling leaves like a response. "But I get it now," he said. "You weren't testing me. You were protecting me." His voice cracked. "You didn't hide money because you didn't trust me. You hid it because you trusted that I didn't need it to love you." Tears returned, slow and heavy. "That was never about you thinking I'd change," he whispered. "It was about you knowing the world would." Michael bowed his head. "For 15 years, I loved you thinking you had nothing." He laughed softly through tears. "And turns out, that was exactly what you want." He sat there a long time, watching the sun dip lower. When he finally stood, his decision was already made. That night, Michael sat back at the kitchen table. The briefcase was closed now. Not hidden, not avoided, just accepted. Daniel Foster arrived again quietly, like a man who already knew the answer. Michael didn't waste time. "I'll take it," he said, "but not the way they expect." Daniel nodded. "I assumed as much." Michael leaned forward, eyes steady. "I'll accept the inheritance," he continued, "but most of it goes back out into the world." Daniel raised an eyebrow slightly. "Victims," Michael said firmly. "People hurt by the same kind of corruption that forced Grace to run. Legal aid, whistleblower protections, families that never got justice." Daniel's lips pressed together in something close to respect. "And the rest?" he asked. Michael didn't hesitate. "I keep enough to live comfortably," he said. "Nothing flashy, nothing loud, just enough to be safe." Daniel nodded. "And the foundation?" Michael's voice softened. "It'll be in her real name," he said. "Not mine, hers. Let her truth stand where her fear once lived." Daniel exhaled slowly. "She would have been proud," he said. Michael gave a sad smile. "She already knew who I was," he replied. He reached over and locked the briefcase for the first time, not out of fear, but finality. The choice was made, not for money, not for power, but for love that survived truth. The world didn't change overnight. Michael Turner half expected it to. Expected something dramatic once the papers were signed, once the accounts unlocked, once the numbers on the screen stretched longer than he could count. But the morning after, he accepted Grace's inheritance. The sun still rose the same way. Light crept through the kitchen window, landing on the worn table where he and Grace had eaten thousands of quiet meals. The kettle still whistled too loud. The floorboard near the sink still creaked when he stepped on it. And Michael still made coffee for two out of habit. He poured the second cup before realizing no one would drink it. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the steam, then finally poured it down the sink. Not angrily, not dramatically, just gently, like letting go. Daniel Foster handled the legal storm quietly. There were meetings Michael refused to attend in person. Lawyers who wanted photos, consultants who wanted statements, media outlets that somehow got wind of the mystery widow with the hidden fortune. Michael declined all of it. No interviews, he told Daniel calmly. No headlines, no stories. They'll keep pushing, Daniel warned. Michael nodded. Let 'em. Because the work didn't need noise. It needed intention. The first check Michael wrote wasn't small. It went to a legal aid organization that helped whistleblowers disappear safely when the truth became dangerous. Grace's kind of people. The second went to a fund for families who'd lost someone to corporate cover-ups. Cases quietly buried, stories never told. The third check was the hardest. It funded a shelter under Grace's real name. Not the name Michael had known. Not the name she'd lived under, but the one she was born with. When Daniel showed him the finalized paperwork, Michael stared at the name printed in bold letters. It felt like seeing her fully for the first time. There, he whispered. That's you. The house didn't change much. Michael could have moved. People expected him to, but he stayed. Same small home, same creaky porch, same quiet neighborhood. The only difference was the weight he carried inside. It was lighter now. He paid off the house, not because he needed to, but because he wanted one less thing tied to worry. He fixed the loose step on the porch Grace always warned him about. He donated her clothes quietly, keeping only one cardigan she wore when she was cold. He framed a single photo of her, not dressed up, not posed, just laughing in the kitchen, hair wrapped up, hands dusted with flour. That was how he wanted to remember her. Weeks passed, then months. Michael found himself busy in ways he hadn't expected. Not meetings, not luxury, but purpose. He visited shelters anonymously, sat in back rows at fundraisers under a fake name, listened more than he spoke. When people thanked him, he always said the same thing. It ain't me. And he meant it. One afternoon, Daniel stopped by with a folder tucked under his arm. There's one last thing, he said gently. Michael raised an eyebrow. Thought we wrapped it all up. Daniel hesitated. Grace left a final instruction. Not legal. Michael stiffened. What is it? Daniel handed him a sealed envelope. Michael recognized her handwriting immediately. His chest tightened. He waited until Daniel left before opening it. The letter we short. Michael, if you're reading this, you already know the truth. I'm sorry for the weight I left you to carry. I hope you never doubt that I loved you for who you were when you thought I had nothing. If you ever wonder whether you did right by me, live kindly. Live quietly. Help when you can. That will always be enough. Grace. Michael folded the letter carefully and pressed it to his chest. I did right by you, he whispered. Didn't I? The house didn't answer, but for the first time, it didn't feel empty either. The foundation grew, slowly, deliberately. Michael insisted on transparency, fairness, and limits. No one gets rich off this, he told the board. This ain't that kind of money. They listened, Because they could tell, this wasn't about control, it was about honor. He visited the shelter one evening just before sunset. A woman thanked him with tears in her eyes. "You saved my kids," she said. Michael shook his head gently. "No, ma'am," he replied. "I just didn't look away." 1 year after Grace's death, Michael returned to her grave. He brought no flowers, just himself. "I figured it out," he said quietly, hands in his pockets. "You weren't testing me. You were teaching me." The wind moved softly across the grass. "I don't hate you for the secret anymore," he continued. "I miss you. That part don't ever go away." He smiled faintly. "But you were right about one thing." He looked up at the sky. "Money changes people." He exhaled. "Love shouldn't." Michael turned and walked away, leaving the grave peaceful behind him. Not because he was done loving her, but because he'd learned how to carry that love forward. The briefcase sat in the safe for a long time before Michael Turner ever touched it again. Not because he was afraid of it, but because he no longer needed it. The money inside had already done what it was meant to do. It had moved, changed hands, found its way into places where silence once lived and fear once ruled. It had become shelters, courtrooms, warm beds, second chances. It wasn't a secret anymore. It was a tool, and tools didn't need to be stared at. On a quiet Sunday morning, Michael stood in his living room, sunlight stretching across the hardwood floor. The house smelled like fresh coffee and lemon cleaner, simple, familiar scents that felt like home. He moved slowly now, not from age, but from thought. Every object carried memory. The couch where Grace used to curl up with her feet tucked under her. The window where she'd stand watching rain like it was telling her something. The small crack in the wall they always meant to fix and never did. He walked to the safe, opened it, and lifted the briefcase out for the last time. Not to open it, just to acknowledge it. "You did your job," he murmured. He locked it back away, turned the key, and slid the safe shut. That chapter was closed. Later that afternoon, Michael drove without destination. No meetings, no obligations, just the road. He passed the diner they used to visit every Friday night, the one with cracked booths and burnt coffee Grace somehow loved. He almost pulled in, then smiled and kept driving. Some places were better left untouched. He stopped at a park instead, sat on a bench, watched families pass by. A father lifting his daughter onto his shoulders, a mother tying her son's shoelace, a couple arguing quietly, then laughing. 5. Life, still moving, still messy, still beautiful. Michael leaned back, eyes closed, and let the sun warm his face. "I get it now," he whispered, not sure who he was talking to. "You weren't running from money. You were running toward peace." Grace had chosen a life where love was the loudest thing in the room. And now, so had he. That evening, Michael stood in the kitchen cooking a simple meal. Rice, vegetables, chicken seasoned just right. Nothing fancy. Never was. He plated the food, set it on the table, and paused. For a split second, habit tugged at him. 2 plates instead of 1. He smiled softly and corrected it. 1 plate, 1 life, still full. Before bed, Michael stepped outside onto the porch. The night air was cool, quiet. He looked up at the stars, scattered and steady, unchanged by wealth or loss or secrets. "I thought I married a poor woman," he said softly, "but I married the richest soul I'll ever know." The words didn't hurt anymore. They heal.